Hello. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Yes, thank you. It's my pleasure to start off this session that we've got this afternoon. My name's Anil Sood. I'm the RCGP Medical Director of Curriculum. So we've got a double act this afternoon. So it's myself kicking us off, and then Shahid Morelli, who's one of our fantastic RCGP curriculum editors, is going to be doing the heavy lifting, which is how I like it, really, if that's okay. So in terms of this session, we've got 90 minutes. When we put the proposal in for today's session, they said, do you want the good news or the bad news? I said, the good news, please. And they said, your session proposal's been accepted. And I said, the bad news? And they said, you've got 90 minutes in the main hall. So me being me, I said, only 90 minutes, so we have to cut it down. But there we go. So in terms of being here, I suspect you voted with your feet in terms of choosing to come along. Nobody's coerced you. So what we want to do is try and make it as interactive as we can. So what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is using your, is it Vivox? Okay, using Vivox. I have no idea how this works. Shahid is going to be controlling this sort of thing for us. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how excited were you when you heard about the RCGP decolonisation talk for 90 minutes on a Monday evening when you're all probably a bit tired and want to go to your hotels and think about food this evening? With 0 being not excited at all, can't think of anything worse, and 10 being, this is the highlight of my life. So,
Mitch, can we have the results, please? Thank you.
Okay. Right, so most people, says it 0 to 5 rather than 0 to 10?
0 to 5.
Okay, I was going to say, because otherwise I'm a bit disappointed, really. Right, so the first thing to say is I don't believe you. You can't be that excited about 90 minutes on the decolonisation of the curriculum, but fair dues, that's your choice, that's good. Thank you. So what I'd like you to do now is just think about what do you actually want from the session? So if you can put that into this, because what myself and Shahid are going to try and do is to cover what you'd like us to cover as much as we're able to. So again, is that going to appear there, Shahid? Okay, thank you. So it'll be whatever you think you'd like to pull in from the session, and we'll do our best to try and cover that for you. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay. Good thing is there's nothing that's come up on there that scares the pants off me, so that's good. Excellent, okay. Right. Is that enough to be going on with Shahid? Think we can cover all that? Okay, well, sorry. Do you think you can cover all that? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. So Shahid is going to keep a record of this, and we'll try and revisit it when we come back towards the end of the session. So it's difficult for me to see, but I'm assuming that some of the audience are general practitioners, so it's about the RCGP curriculum that you'd be interested in. Could you put your hand up if you're not from the general practice background? Okay. So there's a few hands I can see. So although this session is talking about how we approach the RCGP curriculum, I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of things that you can actually use and expand into other forums as well. So what I'd like you to do now is to think about, and you may want to just do this, rather than doing this on this Vivox thing again, if you just want to turn to the person next to you and just spend a couple of minutes just talking about how do you currently use your curriculum, whatever that curriculum is, whether it's primary care, any other specialty. If you just want to spend a couple of minutes talking to someone sat next to you, to interact with each other, to think about how do you use the curriculum that you've got for your specialty. I've just realised that's going to be a challenge for some of you because you're separated out a little bit. But if you just want to talk to either the person next to you or the person behind you, if you can do, or go and join somebody. So if I can ask for, if people are comfortable doing so, did you want to just share any thoughts? Because there's not that many of us in here, so it's not talking to thousands, but share any thoughts about how you currently use your curriculum? Any offers for that?
As a learning needs assessment, using the contents page.
Can people hear that? Can you just shout that out a little bit? There's a microphone just coming to you. Sorry, there's a microphone just coming to you now. Thank you.
To help with the learning needs assessment, too loud, going through the contents page.
Okay, that's great. Then
And
what's your
actually the other thing-
specialty?
General practice.
Right, okay. Thank you. Thank you. So using it as a learning needs assessment. There's somebody down at the front here as well. Abbas?
Hi, thank you. I use it to help to ascertain how aligned with the curriculum the trainee in particular wants us to be, and to find ways to innovate their training if their style of learning doesn't quite fit into the neat round box that sometimes curriculums want.
Okay, so is that almost as a learning planning meeting? And
Almost, but it's kind of like a longitudinal 3-year meeting.
yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. Any other offers?
Hi, Evan.
There's a hand I just saw there.
Don't worry, I think most people will hear me. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Thanks, I'm Secondary Care. I'm a Deputy Director of Clinical Education in Leicester. We don't really use the curriculum because we're not sure what secondary care placement curriculum needs GPs have. So we've gone down the route of developing opportunity booklets, our own in-house curriculum, so they can learn. But one of the challenges we have in secondary care of delivering anything of that variety, for example, clinics for GP trainees, is the curriculum isn't prescriptive about what is required. And our service demands then would determine that, for example, getting to clinics for GP trainees is really hard because specialty trainees have it prescribed in their curricular ARCP outcomes that they must attend clinics. So we find that a real challenge and a lost opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's important to be aware that, certainly for those people who aren't familiar with the general practice programme, it's a 3-year training programme. We've actually got the broadest curriculum with the shortest training time. So it is a huge challenge to release people from rota commitments, from covering on-calls, etc., etc. So it is a huge challenge. So thank you for sharing that. Any other offers?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond in a way to that, because I think the curriculum can be used massively in secondary care to plan for the GP resident doctors. I tell all of my GP resident doctors in their placement planning meeting to sit with their clinical supervisor with the curriculum to look at actually what they can get out of that specialty placement. And I appreciate that often the specialty trainees may get priority over outpatient clinics, but actually, as we spoke about this morning, you know, holding retractor in gynae theatre is not going to help the future GP in managing women's health. So I think there is lots in the curriculum that could be looked at during the placement planning meetings.
Okay, thank you. So it's about using the context that someone's in and trying to adjust the teaching to that. So it doesn't just, you don't have to be in a particular specialty to learn about what you might be doing in your future career, but trying to relate it back to what you're doing. That's great, thank you. Any more officers? There's no other hand up? So just... Oh, over here, sorry. Stuart.
Thank you. We use the Royal College curriculum to plan our 3-year syllabus for ST1 to 3 for half-day release sessions and symposia. So almost all of our sessions are planned 3 years in advance, and that has been updated this year following the recent changes. Please don't change the curriculum too frequently because it's a lot of work for me. But, thank you.
Okay, that's great. So that's the East Midlands Derby training programme, which is, I would say this because Stuart's here, but it's superbly run, very well organised, very well planned out and mapped. So that's excellent, thank you. The next question I've got for you, this is what's your university challenge? Yeah, this is your start of 10 no conferring round. So what is a curriculum? In terms of the Royal Colleges, because each Royal College has a curriculum, so would anybody like to hazard a guess to what they feel a curriculum is? Or indeed maybe should be? Just so I'm clear, it's not just you filling this all out on their behalf, is it, Shahid? No? So again, is that going to appear on there?
Mitch, could we have the results? Thank you.
Okay. Right, okay. So being one of the curriculum editors, there are 30 in the Royal College of General Practitioners, there are 13 curriculum editors spread across all practicing general practitioners spread across the UK, and Shahid's one of those. So do those sort of things cover what you hope the curriculum would be, Shahid? Yeah. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do now, thank you for that again, that's very helpful. I'm very pleased that that's the sort of things that we've had as answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a slide up in terms of what we thought might be helpful for you, but we don't have to cover this. We'll come back to that slide that, where you stated what you wanted from the session. We'll cover more of that than this, really. What I think will be helpful is to put the RCGP curriculum in context, in that the curriculum went through an update, and that update was officially launched on the 1st of August 2025. That process took probably about 4.5 years, 5 years. I was appointed as medical director coming up to 2 years ago. When I was appointed, I was informed by the college that the curriculum update process was going through very well, that we've had lots of engagement with the GMC, and the GMC validate all curriculums. Is it curriculums or curriculi?
Curricula.
Curricula, okay, whichever. So the GMC sign off on it, so they have to approve it. And the college thought when I was appointed that we were very much at the stage, bearing in mind this was 2 years ago, that the curriculum was effectively ready to go. I met with the GMC alongside college colleagues, and it became very clear in that meeting with them that they felt the curriculum was at a completely different stage to where the college thought it was at. And at that point, so this is about 18 months or so ago, the GMC asked us for retrospective evidence of all the track changes that happened to the previous curriculum. That curriculum was from 2019, so they wanted retrospective evidence of track changes, evidence of every person that had been involved in any discussion in terms of so interest groups, any impact on learners, any impact on educators, and they wanted an equality impact statement as well. And this took us aback quite a bit, because it's not what we expected. And as you can imagine, doing it retrospectively was a huge challenge. So we got all that together, and bearing in mind this was about April 23, and I said to the GMC, so they were very helpful, but they had their own sort of processes and procedures. And I said, so when do you think we can get this live? Sorry, April 24. When do you think we can get this live? And they said, by the summer. So, no, fantastic. This summer's not that bad. No. Summer 2025. So there was an additional 14 months or so before we can get it live. The next part of the process was to get it all approved, have the equality impact statement authorised by the GMC, and that approval was given on the 18th of December 2024. The next step that we had to do was to publish the updated curriculum, which hadn't gone live, and that went in February of 2025, because we had to give everybody 6 months' notice of what it was going to look like before it officially launched on the 1st of August. So as you can imagine, myself and Shahid and curriculum editors feel like we've lived, breathed, slept, dreamt this curriculum for years. And it's only just been launched. And going back to Stuart's point about please don't change the curriculum, effectively it's out of date. So There are elements that we've got approval from the GMC that we can update on a regular basis, as long as, and this is the important message about the updated curriculum, it has had no detrimental effect on educators or learners, and certainly has had no detrimental effect or adverse effect on assessments. Because as you can imagine, with any curriculum, assessment drives learning, and nothing can be assessed that isn't in the curriculum. So we work very closely in terms of the Royal College TRIPOS assessment team of the AKT, the Applied Knowledge Test, the SCA, and the workplace-based assessments, and work very closely to make sure that nothing is put into the curriculum that can't be assessed. So the two areas of assessment and the curriculum are very much married together. So in terms of what the curriculum is, the RCGP curriculum, one of my main roles is to monitor the curriculum, try and make sure it's as up-to-date as possible, and to look at its effectiveness and whether it's actually appropriate. In terms of that, does anybody actually know how many pages the RCGP curriculum is? Shahid, you can't answer this. Well, in fact, do you know? You don't? I'm so disappointed. Okay. Anybody like to hazard a guess as to how many pages the RCGP curriculum is? 250. We can do prices right, higher or lower. So higher or lower than 250? Higher, it is. 525 pages. Okay. It's split across 3 documents. There's Being a GP, which is 99 pages long. There's the there's the topic guides, of which there are 32 topic guides. And they're split into 22 clinical, 6 professional, 4 life stage. And that section is 318 pages long. I've spent way too much time on this. And then the last bit is the super condensed curriculum guide, which is a abridged version of 27 of the topic guides, and that's 108 pages, which, if my maths is right, makes 525 pages. In terms of the curriculum, it's already a vast document. In terms of getting people engaged and reading it, I've got some figures that I can share with you in terms of how well that engagement has gone and how it is currently going. But what the curriculum isn't is not a syllabus. It's never set up as a syllabus. The GMC requirement for our curriculum and all Royal College curriculums is that they need to be professional standards through high-level learning outcomes. It is not meant to be a list of every condition that everybody needs to know. And the reason for that is that there's way too much medical knowledge out there for us to try and condense it down to a manageable figure. And 525 pages, I would already suggest, is fairly unwieldy. Can I ask you a question, Shahid? So when did you first read the RCGP curriculum, cover to cover? Before you started as an editor?
Not before, when I started as an editor.
When you started as an editor, okay. And how long have you been an editor now?
Since 2022.
So
January 22.
Fairly recent, okay. So I was appointed as the medical director of the RCGP curriculum almost exactly 2 years ago. I've been involved in undergraduate medical education since 1998 and postgraduate medical education since 2009. So I'll ask you this question, Shahid. When do you think I first read the RCGP curriculum?
After you got the job.
You're such a cynic. It was 2 weeks before my interview, is the actual answer. And the reason for that is I looked at it and I thought, 520 pages, or it was about 500 plus pages. I thought, this is way too unwieldy. There's no way I can manage this. With the best will in the world, I know I ought to read it, but I can't get it. It's just too much. So, I've already covered in terms of what the curriculum is and what it isn't. The being a GP part of the curriculum, which is that 99-page document at the beginning, covers the knowledge, skills, attitude, and behaviour required of a practicing general practitioner in this country. And one of the aims, which is what Shahid is going to come on to talk about fairly shortly, is that the aim of updating the curriculum was to try and make it even more user-friendly, and I think we've done that, and we're very proud of the work that we've done with that, and to make it more inclusive and less exclusive. And that's essentially what you're going to talk about in a little bit. Is that right, Shahid? Okay. So in terms of the main updates to the curriculum, we've altered the formatting, and I'll show you that in a moment. We've made sure that we've addressed each of those 3 sections of being a GP, topic guides and super condensed curriculum guides. And we've worked very, very closely with the admin team, and our admin team at the college are superb, plus the web team, to make sure that pictorially it looks a lot better and is a lot more readily available and usable by people. So in terms of the main updates, it's streamlining things, bringing things up to date. As you can imagine, in 2019, we hadn't got anything about COVID in there, so we brought that sort of thing. We've separated out things like neurodiversity and mental health because they were both lumped together in the previous version of the curriculum. We've separated those out, which I think quite appropriately. We've made some changes to the point descriptors for transition from each year of training from ST1, ST2 to ST3, with no, as I said, adverse impact on assessments for any of the trainees, and that's working very closely with the WPBA team. And in terms of the actual curriculum itself, the way I got my head around the curriculum was that for the RCGP, we have 6 monthly ARCP panels or educational supervisor reviews, which the trainees rate themselves across 13 different capabilities. And essentially, the curriculum is those 13 capabilities. And once I got my head around that, it made the curriculum itself much more palatable. So those areas, I'm just going to flick through these very quickly. So it's knowing yourself, applying clinical knowledge, managing complex and long-term care, working well in organisation systems, caring for the whole person. And those are the main areas that the curriculum covers, and they're the 13 capabilities that the learners are asked to self-rate every 6 months or so with a formal ARCP panel annually. So in terms of linking that in with assessments, as I said, we work very closely with the assessments team, and each of the areas of assessment test different areas of the curriculum, and they're all linked to the curriculum. And I often get messages from the assessments team, and we meet reasonably regularly, saying, we're thinking about updating this, or we've got this, is that appropriate for us? Is it covered in the curriculum? And we have a quick look, check that, and say yay or nay appropriately. Would you like to know how I got this job? Sure, okay. It's my wife's fault that I got this job. And the reason for that is that I was already involved with the college previously as an external advisor, helping with ARCP panels nationally, acting as a critical friend. The advert came up. I looked at the advert and thought, well, that looks quite interesting. But I thought, there's no way I can get that job. It's too highbrow. I haven't got the brain capacity. I'm not experienced enough. Haven't got the international recognition. There's not a cat in hell's chance of me getting that. So mentioned it to my wife, and being the wise lady that she is, she said, well, the answer is always going to be no if you don't apply. So I contacted the college and said, is it worth me applying? To which they said, you can give it a go, which encouraged me. So I applied, got shortlisted, got interviewed, and was offered the post. Went back to my wife, and the first thing that she said when I told her that I'd been offered the post. Sorry? Why did you? Well, I wish she'd said that. What she said was, because I said I've been offered the post, she said, that's lovely, but why have they appointed you? Thank you very much. That brought me back down to earth. But in terms of the curriculum itself, it's there to be used by educators, learners, and all general practitioners. It's to set professional standards. The number of words used for any item in the curriculum is not representative of how important that topic is, because you can have high-level statements with few words covering a lot of detail underneath it. So in terms of how we suggest that the curriculum's used, on page 95 of Appendix 1 of the Being a GP, I told you I need to get out more, is an assessment blueprint, which the college admin team put together looking at every area of the curriculum and mapping it in terms of the capabilities and how and where it might be assessed or even might not be assessed. So that's a fantastic document if you want to reference it for yourself if you work in primary care. Then obviously there's assessment tools, and I'm not going to go through most of those. The clinical topic guides, as I said, there's 32 of them. And what we've done with those clinical topic guides is done abridged versions of 27 of them, because 27 of them lend themselves to that. And what we tend to do is, within each topic guide, there are sections. There used to be, I think it was how to learn is how it was phrased in the previous version. We didn't really like that, so we've changed it to learning opportunities. And we give examples in each area of how things might be covered. And the super condensed guides are abridged versions of the topic guides. And those are the areas, along with the topic guides, where we spent a lot of time decolonising the curriculum and looking at, as I said, trying to make sure it's more inclusive and less exclusive. So this is just an example of one of the super condensed curriculum guides. This is cardiovascular health. And the formatting is completely different to how it used to be. Before it was just listed as, and it doesn't come across that well in this because there are 2 pages together. But if you imagine they're separate pages, it looks a lot more user-friendly. The areas that are particularly useful for educators and learners are the sections on how this area might be assessed in terms of AKT, SCA, and workplace-based assessments. And then I also talk about how this learning opportunities and where to actually go for more detail. And there's more detail of that in the actual topic guides itself. The last thing I'm going to say is that one of my main roles is I get contacted, I can't say daily, but on a weekly basis by either patient interest groups, colleagues, specialists, members of Parliament, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, essentially saying GPs should know more about, and then fill in the blank. My role, and along with the admin team, is to look at the curriculum, to pick out the areas that they've mentioned, and to reinforce that GPs already do know a lot, and that what we're doing is the curriculum is not a syllabus, and it's high-level statements and the number of words used, etc., etc. So, having said that, we do make adjustments to the wording in the curriculum, and the most stark example I can think of that was the Women's Health Library came to us once we'd launched the updated curriculum, saying that we'd given an example of how an interaction might happen in a primary care setting, where a lady came along to ask for a termination, which is perfectly reasonable, it's under the gynae section. But the next part of the statement of the STEM said something along the lines of, the lady admitted to drinking excess amounts of alcohol and practicing an unsafe sex. And they felt, quite rightly, the Women's Public Health Library felt that the second part of the STEM had nothing to do with the first and wasn't necessary and was quite judgmental. So that's a practical example. We looked at it and thought, well, actually, it's not necessary. It doesn't add to the learning opportunity. So we took that bit out. So we're trying to be as interactive as we can when it's appropriate. Okay? And now I'm going to hand over to you, Shahid, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil. It's lovely to be with you all this afternoon. My name is Shahid. I'm a curriculum editor with Anil. I'm also an associate professor at Aston Medical School, which is based walking distance from here in the city centre of Birmingham. This is a new medical school from 2018, and I established and set up and led the Department of Primary Care Education across the MBCHB. I also have another leadership role at the college. I'm the clinical lead for quality management and training standards, and I'm a GP partner. My surgery is about 10 miles north of here in Walsall. Thank you so much, Anil, for setting the scene, describing and explaining what the RCGP curriculum is, what it isn't, and how we got there. And in the second part of today's session, what I'd like to do is to explore and unpack this idea of decolonisation a little bit more. I'd like us to have a shared understanding towards the end of what decolonisation means. and a little bit more about how it might have affected us as learners, as teachers, and then the practical things and the process that we've undertaken, or rather begun to undertake at the RCGP to decolonize the curriculum. It's not a process that's finished, it's something that we've begun and started. Now, the first thing I think we should be mindful of is that this word, decolonizing, is a powerful word, an emotive word, and it means different things to different people. So the first thing I'd like us to do, please, is to use the word cloud just to explain your reaction or your feeling to the word, not necessarily in medical education, of what comes to mind when you see or hear this word colonization or decolonization. One of my thoughts or reactions comes from my personal heritage. My parents were born in East Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania in the 1950s, which was under British colonial rule, which ended in the 1960s. So my parents' education was really influenced by being under British colonial rule and then not being, and lots of other things too, economic factors, cultural factors. And I hear from my parents both positive as well as negative aspects of that. And I think my family has experienced a different lens of that heritage, being Asians living in East Africa, which would have been different, of course, admittedly, for native black Africans. Maybe a little bit different for my parents-in-law, who were both born in Uganda, who fled to the UK as refugees as the British left, and it filled a void, a power vacuum, and an ultra-nationalistic government came in and expelled all people of Asian ethnicity, and the state seized all their assets. So there's a lot of generational trauma there in that. And I just wanted to be open and honest and transparent to say that none of us come from a position of nowhere. And similarly, all of us will come with ideas and thoughts, and none of us in this room come from a position of nowhere. So can we have a look at the word cloud, please, Mitch, just to see what we mean by this? And I can see comments of who was silenced, and historical legacies and power imbalances and globalization discomfort. And I thought this would be a good place to start, just to get that off our chests initially, and just to maybe alleviate the emotional burden of having thought about this. So now, thank you. I appreciate you engaging with that. Can we now have a think about what decolonizing really means to us in medical education, being a little bit more specific? Again, using the same link and the word cloud, could you please now explore what does it mean to you in medical education? So that poll will be open now. Sorry for the delay, my phone is thinking about it. If it doesn't open up in a second, perhaps we can get some thoughts with the microphones. Oh, it's opened up, but I would like to unpack this a little bit more. So once I do see some themes, I'd love for people to expand on them and unpack it a little bit with the microphones going around, just in a moment. Could we begin to see the results, please, Mitch? It's not showing. I've got it working. No. Okay. I've got some different words coming in. Mitch is just going to see if it does display. Perhaps if you could just refresh that, Mitch, it might work. I've got the word inclusive. A few people have put the word inclusive. Would anyone mind unpacking that, whoever wrote that? Could I see a hand up? The word inclusive. Who put that down? None of you thought that I might come to you if you put a word down to explain it. If no one's consenting, then I'm just going to ask for microphones to be put into people's faces, if you don't mind. Would you mind putting the microphone up to these to this group up here? And perhaps one of you could expand on this. Thank you. Yes, please. Anything to expand on what you might feel of decolonising a medical education? Thank you.
From my point of view, I just thought making it more relevant.
Relevant. And that's a word I can see coming through on the word cloud. Could we have the microphone maybe with these three ladies at the back here? If there's anything that you might be able to add. Thank you.
Hello. I think my understanding of colonialism is that it sees everything from the white, European, male, straight, wealthy perspective as being the norm, and everything else is not the norm and not as good and whatever. So the way we teach medicine, so I do a lot of teaching clinical reasoning, even the materials we use is often still, and the research that's done and the priority that's given to health is often still from that perspective as a historical legacy. So a lot of things are actually taught very badly as a result, for example.
Do you organise that undergraduate or postgraduate?
I teach teachers. So I run a master's in medical education, so we have a curriculum module and teaching clinical reasoning, and there's a thread of decolonisation that we're trying to address and what that means.
Thank you. Could someone at the back there be prepared to say something? But I just wanted to expand on something that was said here, that when a UK medical school recently reviewed their reading lists, 70% of authors on the entirety of the reading list were white. 90% of all sources were from either Europe or North America or Australasia. So it kind of expands on the point you're making a little bit there. Thank you.
So the sort of thoughts that I was thinking about, I suppose, with medical education in mind is more my main mind about recentering, sort of unlearning bias, and sort of more challenging and dismantling those sort of previous power structures and assumptions that are before.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Perhaps from you, this group over here, are there any comments that you could add to that about what decolonising means to you? Oh, we've got one here. Thank you. And then perhaps we can come over to the front after.
If I'm allowed to talk about the challenge, I think, with that, so I really agree with the person over there, is not excluding then the people that we're talking about. So I'm very mindful with my, for instance, students that are white, male, straight, trying to keep it inclusive in that way as well.
Again, the word include, thank you. That's so helpful, thank you. We've got a microphone over here. Can anyone contribute from over here, please? Thank you. Oh, you're picking it up to hand over.
I think, thinking about removing bias, my understanding is we can't, it's very difficult to remove our biases, but it's being aware that we have them, I guess, is what it's meaning for me.
I suppose I was obviously thinking in relation to bias, in relation to unconscious bias, and of course by their very nature they are unconscious, but spending time considering this, talking about it in collective groups within our profession, and surfacing these difficult conversations.
Yeah, and they can be difficult, they can be really challenging and sometimes awkward to have those conversations. Anybody, and maybe we'll take this as a last comment here. Last 3 comments here. Just give us 10 seconds, we'll get a microphone to you. Thank you.
Whilst I wasn't the person that had said inclusive, I can understand why that might be up there, because with the word decolonisation, even if you just take the D part rather than the colonisation, you think usually when you have words that begin with D, it suggests that you're removing something. And I think sometimes removing something allows us to go back to core structures and core ideas and core values in order to then rebuild things in the way that we want them to look. And depending on who the stakeholders are that are involved in that rebuilding process, you can potentially open the door to having inclusion. I think the sad thing, and the thing that we all have to bear in mind, is that decolonisation doesn't always mean you're going to end up with something better, because it does depend who your stakeholders are and who's on the table. Like one of you just mentioned something about resource lists sometimes being terribly uninclusive. If that's who your stakeholders are, you might struggle to create something that's better than what you started with. So I think the main learning for me is that if inclusion is the goal, then a lot of thought needs to be put in at every stage of the journey, and that team needs to be a very diverse team representing, you know, different areas in education, different areas in medicine, different, you know, backgrounds, and thinking about kind of social determinants of health and all of these factors that basically define diversity, in the hope that, you know, your new product is fit for purpose, using words like relevance and all those other words that were discussed before.
Thank you. Thank you.
For me, I did put the word up, inclusive. There you go. No, it's okay. But for me, it's addressing differential attainment, just levelling the playing field for everybody.
Thank you.
If we have time, I think you've summarised it beautifully, but I think probably the thought that springs to mind is that it's something that's going to be very, very difficult. And the reason why I say that is when you look at the history of medical education, we're talking 300 to 400 years where medical education coming out of a particular region within the world became something that was deemed as the Dark Ages and something that wasn't of equal value, because those that were providing the assessment of what is the Light Age and what is the Dark Age and what is a first world country and what is a third world country look at the world and education from a single lens. And so I think bringing in the inclusivity of it means that we need to take a step back and assess and have a look at the variety of education that was in existence and is in existence, and allowing each one to shine on its merit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a comment at the back there. Could we get a microphone just behind there? Thank you.
I also want to add that I think decolonising, especially within medical education, isn't just about the inclusivity, but also making reference to where the knowledge has come from. And I think a lot of the medicine that we practice and continue to teach others actually has profited from colonisation, and that I think that needs to be made aware of by people like us who are educators to the people we are imparting this knowledge upon.
Was there any type of knowledge or type of learning that you came to your mind when you were thinking of this comment?
Yes, so I was thinking about the Tuskegee syphilis studies.
Yes.
And a lot of what we know about syphilis now, I don't know if you're about to talk about this.
No, I'd love you to expand upon it. It'll be more powerful coming from you.
So from what I understand about it, a lot of what we know about syphilis and its long course in its primary to tertiary stages comes from the purposeful infection of particular groups with syphilis and the withdrawal or withholding of treatment to those people in order to see how the disease progresses. And so what we learn now, what we all know about syphilis now, unfortunately comes from the exploitation of people who have been colonised.
And it similarly sends shudders down me when I think about similar things in terms of analgesia for ladies in childbirth or other gynecological procedures, when black African slaves had surgical procedures undertaken on them without consent, without anesthesia, and similar types of events. And then what happens in these communities is they experience, in the literature the term is a peripheral trauma. So within that community, within that family, within that culture, there will be experiences lived in generations, maybe even 1 or 2 generations above, and they've heard about these stories verbally through oral traditions, hearing about how members of the community have been impacted and affected by such practice. And if you give the example about syphilis, when we now have challenges of how patients view us as physicians and the trust they give us, and how that can be affected, and how there may be vaccine hesitancy in certain demographics, it builds a bigger picture about why that may be the case. Thank you so much for sharing that example.
Thank you.
We have another comment over here, please. Oh, wait, there's a mic coming. Thank you.
The discussion is becoming very wide, I think, because we're talking about medical evidence, we're talking about language, Sophia's point about language, and I think it makes me think about how us as educators have drawn on things that are familiar and easier with us. And I've been very interested in health equity. In the far side chat, we were talking about the inverse care law, but we've got the inverse training law. That, you know, our evidence isn't drawn for those more complicated patients, more... you know, they're difficult to engage in our studies.
Yes.
And I hadn't particularly seen the decolonising referring to this before, but
yes.
I can see it does. And I was quite excited, to go back to Anna's things about numbers, that the Curriculum 25 had something like health equity in it 27 times. I thought, hey, you know, we're getting there. But I think it's, again, what Sophia's saying, it's an ongoing thing. You've got to, you know, it's a really hard thing to address, isn't it?
And you are exactly right that when it comes to medical studies, recruitment into those studies is so often less from different minority ethnic backgrounds. And then we try and make sure that those evidence bases fit the whole population and the diversity of it. And you're exactly right. And that's another aspect of decolonising in how we view and perceive education and the formation of knowledge to be. Thank you so much for expanding on that. Are there any other comments? One more at the back, please.
Thank you. Just a slightly more practical point about how we sort of decolonise aspects of medical education, but thinking about things like our simulation actors, so how we make sure we have a diverse range of actors that are providing the experience for our students. So they're not just seeing predominantly Caucasian, white male actors in their simulation and thinking that's what they'll experience in clinical environments.
Yes, such a good point. And maybe even more than that too. Maybe the case writers for the OSCEs need to come from a diverse range. Maybe we should be looking at the actual cases from a different perspective. Why is it so often the case that the middle-aged person who has diabetes because they're overweight comes from a South Asian background, and that's the patient that gets angry? Why is it that in simulation in undergraduate and postgraduate education, mannequins don't reflect the skin tones of the population? And as you said, it can expand for assessors and all different aspects in assessment too. So you make such a valid point. Thank you. Thank you. I think your neighbour has a point. Thank you. Yeah, was that you? Sorry, did you have...
No, I'm the person that delivers the microphone.
Sorry. You can say something too, please.
I'm okay, thank you.
I think, did you say there's one over here? Thank you.
I just wanted to add just one more thing for completeness, although I appreciate it'll never be complete. I think we also need to remember the reputation of the RCGP. It is internationally renowned as a place of excellence. And for that reason, it's really important that we take the time to establish where things are coming from and how they are constructed. And I say that personally from, obviously, yes, fine, my work in postgraduate education, but actually a lot of undergraduate curriculums, primary care curriculums, are created using the RCGP curriculum as a kind of gold standard to shape that. There's also a lot of overlap with the UK MLA, and in addition to that, I also do a lot of international medical education, and I'm constantly being asked to use the RCGP curriculum as a gold standard to shape the delivery of primary care education for our international GP colleagues.
Internationally.
So we have a lot of pressure, you could say, to make sure that when our curriculums and our guidance, even things like the ESRs, so many times I've been asked by our international colleagues that, could you send us the RCGP template, because we really like that, we'd like to use it, So we have such a kind of responsibility to make sure that whatever we create in our curriculum, it really has been given so much thought and really has got the full kind of 360 view on it, because, our reputation is massive.
Thank you. Thank you. Big responsibility. Any more comments before we move on? Mitch, could we go back to the slide deck, please? I'll take you back to 2020. George Floyd was tragically murdered. Soon after, there were lots of social movements throughout the world. In 2021, the RCGP Council tasked the curriculum editors to look to decolonize the curriculum with this working definition. And when we're thinking about understanding how the historical and inclusion and exclusion of knowledge and its producers has shaped the profession, I mean, this comes back into the topics we've been hearing about. What is evidence-based medicine? Where did that term appear from? And what does the gold standard actually mean? And in that, if we unpack that a bit more, who and how were the hierarchies of that created when it comes to research institutes and universities and political involvement and the pharmaceutical industry? And then critically reflect on the origins and the formation of knowledge and how this knowledge is taught. Here we heard about the existence of the knowledge base. And I think if I was to reflect back when I was a younger doctor, soon out of medical school, I think I had a sense of cultural competence in that if a patient were to tell me how their traditional or their home remedies were helping them or maybe more preferential to them, I would respectfully acknowledge that. But I think it was, to be honest, more with a shrug my shoulders, well, if that works for you. And then I would, out of my pocket, say, but wouldn't you like my gold standard treatment as well? And I think over the years, I've developed something different, maybe a sense of not cultural competence, but maybe cultural humility out of that process. And then we heard the phrases here just earlier, dismantling and reframing and reconstructing practices, and thinking about how power hierarchies, how they affect the ability to challenge and how that might affect patient care. So now what I'd like to do is to spend 5 minutes, I think you've gotten to know my style now. After these 5 minutes, we're going to go around with a microphone and like to unpack some of these conversations, please. So 5 minutes, please, discussing with your neighbor how any aspect of decolonizing or colonizing has affected either your learning or your teaching. Within this room, I think we've all had some experience of learning or teaching, and how that may have been affected and how. So let the volume of the auditorium increase now. I recognize everyone's been seated for quite a while. Feel free to get up, stretch your legs. If anyone needs to use the facilities too, feel free. But please, let the volume increase for 5 minutes. We'll come back, and then the microphones will come around, and we'll be able to hear more conversation. Thank you. excellent. I hope you've had some rich conversations with your neighbours, and we'll try and bring the microphone around the whole of the auditorium in a similar way. Could we begin from up here? How has decolonising affected your learning or teaching, and how? Thank you.
Is that working? There is. Hi. So I work as a TBD, and I think the way that it's affected my teaching has been in two parts. One, in who I feel I am as a teacher. I think having grown up generally having teachers, mentors and leaders who didn't necessarily look like me or shared the same life story, I always felt that that was the definition of a professional or successful teacher looked and sounded a certain way, presented themselves in a certain way, and talked about certain types of ideas. And then this is what would bring credibility and bring success in the teaching space. So I think in some of the decolonisation has been around my own thinking and being able to bring my whole and authentic self into the teaching space. And part of that has meant during teaching being able to, when I have a thought and it links back to elements of discrimination or bias that I know exist in the system, not just thinking about it in my heart, but actually verbalizing it to the cohort and being able to share that as part of who I am as a teacher. So some of it has been, I think, internal, and then some of it is bringing it out into the fore and sharing it and not just thinking about it.
Thank you. Can I ask, how did that make you feel as an educator, feeling able to do that?
I think initially it made me feel quite vulnerable. I felt like I was doing something different to the norm of my colleagues. As part of the teaching group I was, as the the only South Asian female in that group initially, and that sort of felt like, is this naivety? Is this something that's going to make me look less credible in this space when I already have to build that credibility? But actually, afterwards, when I saw that it did resonate with the registrars who saw that representation of their story in one of their educators, that felt really empowering, and made me feel a little bit bolder continuing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any, could you share some examples of, would that be okay? Or nothing? Yeah, please, I'd be love to, thank you.
Hi, so your talk about humility really resonated with me, because I think that's something that we really try and teach on our programme. So I'm an educator for all 3 years of GP, and I think that professional curiosity that we want to develop as GPs is actually kind of a useful thing, whether you're thinking about colonisation or not. It's understanding people and being happy to be wrong, I guess. So we talked a bit about unconscious bias being the problem, that you don't know you've got it. And I think it's, as a doctor, you have to kind of learn that you can be wrong, and that's not a bad thing. So that learning that listening, I think, really matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Could we have the microphone at the front left here? Oh, thank you. And perhaps after that we'll come to the top left. Could you share any ideas about how any of these concepts have affected your learning or teaching?
I mean, I think it's recognition of your own self within this, so that you can understand your own ignorance and learn from others. So I hope I'm not super old, but as I get older, it's important to realise that there's new ideas coming, to be open to hearing what they are, to bringing yourself up to date, to making sure that you recognise your own bias, your own privilege, learning from that and being open to receive that information from others and share it then, potentially from your position of authority, which it's important not to be ignorant of the fact that you're ignorant. So that's been my personal learning. I think I've been in education for many years, and it's changed over the time, and it's important to stay current, and it's important to listen to the next generation of people coming through so that we keep it current, and decolonisation is part of that. So that's why I've come to this talk, and that's why I think it's really important to recognise it and then move forward and modernise and make ourselves fit for the future.
Thank you. Could we have the microphone at the top left? And then this microphone may be in the centre here for the next comment, please.
Hi, Shahid. For decolonising in terms of teaching
both in terms of our learners and also for our patients. What I think has become new for me is we've only just recently started to use reduced BMI in in certain populations.
In South Asian populations.
Yeah. Up till now, for a long time we've been teaching that this is the standard and that's what you've got to use. So just using, people are starting to recognise there's differences in that. And I'm sure that's going to grow a lot more with other things as well in other areas of medicine. It's only been a recent change.
Thank you. That's so valuable. And in fact, that is one of the changes that were made in the RCGP curriculum about BMI thresholds, similarly with EGFR calculations in the same way. Thank you. Could we have this microphone maybe in the center around here? Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not a GP. I'm a child psychiatrist, and I work in South London and Maudsley. And I think what we were discussing was about how the sort of side effects or the consequences of colonization is not just limited from what we experience from the colonizer. Sometimes a lot of these biases come from people who've actually been colonized and amongst those groups. So I think in practice what that basically means is when I am an IMG, so I did my training in India. So I think somehow there are these internalized stereotypes that qualifications from, non-colonizing nations might be inferior. And I think I was curious about why that is the case, and maybe that is one of the reasons I wanted to get involved in medical education and see for myself, is it really different? And I've been in this role for a few months now, and I can say not. And in some ways, I do think our training is better than what medical students here experience, or even core trainees here experience, because ours is a very, I think, holistic system in healthcare provision, which is something even colonizing nations can learn. So I think it's not just undoing what we've experienced, but it's also teaching the colonizers in some ways that you can learn a lot from us as well.
That's very valuable. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, continuing the theme of international medical graduates. So my parents were IMG doctors from the 70s and 80s, and I saw the racism that they faced in the NHS, and thankfully it has changed so much. Of course, there's always improvements to be made, but things that they went through were pretty shocking by today's standards. And as an IMG myself, I was born in Birmingham and raised, but I moved to Pakistan and I did my degree there and came back and did my exams, etc. And married to an IMG as well. It has influenced my current career as an educator, as a TPD, and my affinity to address differential attainment and to work with IMG doctors so that they don't have to go through things that the loved ones around me have been through.
Thank you for your good work. Do you have a comment here? Please go ahead. Please go ahead. And then afterwards, I'll come to this section. I'm mindful I haven't taken any comments from up here.
The only thing I was going to add is I think it's great the work that you had put an example up earlier of the new condensed guides, because one of our secondary care colleagues over there had commented that sometimes in secondary care they're not really aware of what exactly is required from the primary care residents. And the guide looks very welcoming, and certainly our trainees, our registrars weren't even aware of these guides, and I'm hoping that now they will be. But I guess, as somebody's mentioned earlier, content is content, but there is a lot more that goes into education, and I think ensuring that we understand that and we contextualize that. So role modelling came up earlier about seeing people who you can relate to in positions that make you feel that things are suddenly accessible. That helps you to learn. The modes of delivery, the techniques, the evidence base behind how you're delivering also helps people to learn. Anil, you had mentioned earlier about separating mental health and neurodivergence in the curriculum. That helps because neurodivergence, as we know in its own right, is not a mental health condition. However, it does impact how patients, peers, colleagues, learners are engaging in education. So I think what's really important when we decolonise is also considering what recolonising is, and that means contextualising both content, education, role modelling, and the full package, really.
Thank you. As you say, education isn't just content. I'm mindful we haven't had any comments from up here. Could we get a microphone up at the top? Would that be okay? Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Would anybody like to contribute to this conversation, how decolonising or colonisation has affected your teaching or learning? Perhaps around the middle? Would anybody like to make any comments? Yeah, great, we've got one at the top, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you to all the people in the room as well. I think what I wanted to add was colonizing, decolonizing, affecting your learning or teaching. I think there is a little bit about obviously the curriculum, where the knowledges that we have brought in, and people have mentioned about syphilis and so on. So there is a little bit about the breadth of knowledges that have encapsulated themselves into what we now call medicine. So there is an awareness of that, so that when you're teaching that, you're aware of it. There is an element of knowing who you're teaching. So in the first session, the plenary, we were talking about global mobilization of healthcare workers, and how does that play out in the context of historical colonization and current neocolonial structures that may continue to persist. And that has an implication of who's sitting in the classroom, what they might know, what we are able to teach, and also what we are able to learn from them. So, and there is an element about looking out to the future as well, how we're teaching today that may potentially not reproduce the challenges that we have carried over from the previous decades or centuries.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your valuable comments. I'll speak for another few minutes, and I'll ensure that we finish a little bit early ahead of schedule. So what we sought to undertake, and I'd like to talk a bit more about the process and what resulted in this decolonization process, is that we had a few aims. We looked to ensure that we had a paradigm shift. Too often we speak about knowledge from other cultures, or even our colleagues, our doctors who've trained globally, as, okay, we welcome, but how much do we consider that actually to be an asset? And I think there's a change of paradigm that needs to take place there. Cultural safety is so important, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy, thinking about workplace safety, psychological safety, and that comes as part of the curriculum. We've heard about unconscious bias, so I won't speak about that much further, but a way of addressing that often is just a prompt reflection, which again, we try and encourage throughout the curriculum. We've talked about clinical content representing the diversity of the population in ways such as BMI thresholds. And we've also heard about, thinking about the real world and thinking about us as part of the global community. Now, of course, we are setting the standard for UK general practice, no doubt, but with the diversity of the population, there is a component of that to the global community. And we've heard the word inclusive so many times today, haven't we? And this whole curriculum is about making it more inclusive and less exclusive. And I often feel that there is so much scope for using humanities to foster these types of attitudes and ethoses. So Anil has described the structure of our curriculum team. And what we undertook with each of these topic guides, we each were assigned, all of them, as first and or second editors. We read them, and then the role of the second editor was to challenge and critique what we had commented. And we looked at this and read this again and again through different lenses. One time it would have been through a clinical lens, another from a linguistic lens. But we had a pro forma for us to look at this through a decolonizing lens too. So we looked at the scope of each of these topic guides, considered the breadth of them, whether or not there were things that we were including or excluding, and we were making comparisons. We were looking for potential controversies, potential triggers, as we described potentially uncomfortable truths from the past and how evidence bases are formed. We looked at the different references and authorities. We heard about how a lot of references are from Europe, Australasia, North America, thinking about the historical context of where and how knowledge has come from, and tying that back into that global knowledge base. We ensured that representation was there in identities of all case studies. In fact, we had a tracker through all identities throughout the entirety of the curriculum to make sure that there was good, appropriate representation. Language is important, not just in the way that it's accessible to everybody, but also in the way that language might be used inadvertently, pejoratively against certain groups. And making sure that case studies didn't perpetuate misconceptions. We heard of an example that Anil mentioned, and this is so difficult, it's so nuanced, because sometimes you want to prompt reflection, but then that should come with a kind of a warning. This is designed to prompt reflection, because otherwise we could inadvertently just perpetuate misconceptions in writing about it. Why is it that we're mentioning that the ethnicity is from Africa just because it's sickle cell? We're mentioning the person is homosexual because they have HIV. And just thinking about those different perpetuations of these misconceptions. Thinking about the context and the geography and how actually we work in global health systems as well. And thinking also more deeply about conflicts of epistemology, or the source of knowledge, the theory of knowledge, and highlighting all those potential biases that we heard about just now. And then, as I mentioned, the relevance of it is, of course, for UK general practice, a learner-centered way. We heard about the inclusion of the super condensed guides, because not all learners read from words. And we were continually thinking and making sure that the emphasis of the curriculum is where it should be. And so that is the lens through which we were looking at it again and again, and we made lots of different changes through it. And I just wanted to share with you just a handful of examples. As Anil mentioned, the curriculum topic guides are divided into some different areas. So these are some from the life stage topic guides. Thinking about, for example, patients with cancer. There was some language that was identified that was relating to ethnicity in a negative way when it came to an expression of identity. Thinking about the MDT as this kind of power structure, and we know what happens when there's a strong power structure in organizations. Also about symptom management. Why is it that patients at the end of life who are in pain from different minoritized ethnic groups aren't believed when they're in pain, and they're not provided with the same level of analgesia? And it was there in all different aspects too. When it came to older adults, there was this negative stereotyping of aging compared to this idea of living well. And I touched on some aspects of pain management at the end of life too. And then moving on to the clinical topic guides, dermatology is such an important topic, isn't it? And recently there's been a trend, there's been this, the Mind the Gap production, just to see what different dermatological presentations look like on different skin tones. There's an equivalent dental one too, Bridging the Gap, to see what that looks like in different types of mouths with different pigmentation. ENT, potentially pejorative language around those with hearing impairment. Gastroenterology, we heard about BMI thresholds, thank you. Similarly about what does a good diet, what's a healthy diet, and how is that represented culturally? In infectious diseases, through this type of critique, we realized actually we're not including homeless groups in the curriculum, now they are. Different outcomes related to COVID as an example, and also vaccine hesitancy, we spoke about that earlier. Other examples when it comes to maternity and reproductive health, cultural approaches to pregnancy. And I mean, we know about the statistics of maternal mortality, don't we, in black women in the UK compared to white women. And we highlighted that. And in a similar way, different differences in hospital presentations and mental health conditions. Metabolic problems and endocrinology, the different prevalence of diabetes, the potential positive impacts of fasting in the month of Ramadan, In renal and neurology, I mentioned about EGFR formula, and also I mentioned about how case studies should be representative, and how we used a tracker to make sure that throughout the entirety of the curriculum, there's a breadth of case study examples. Sexual health, we've spoken about the termination of pregnancy example, and similarly potentially prejudicial language relating to transgender people. And so when we put that together, I'll say that, and I have the humility to say that I'm at the beginning of a learning journey when it comes to decolonizing, and the RCGP curriculum is on a journey to decolonize. The work is not done. And so now, in the last few minutes, just before we tie up, I'd just like to open up again before we close to ask if anybody has any comments to say, what should we or what could be done next? Would anybody like to, we'll take a couple of comments. Could we have a microphone over here, please? So the question is what could we or what should we be doing next? Now, I mean this not just in terms of the RCGP curriculum, but more widely, please, in terms of all medical education. Could we get a microphone over here? Would that be okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, by the way. That was really interesting. I just want to say I'm not sure about the term decolonising covering all of the considerations, just seeing homelessness on the slide. So when I think of decolonising, I think of hearing hidden voices and increasing representation. And I just wonder if there's an extra facet that we also need to consider.
Could you expand a bit more?
So I could be not thinking through this enough, but I'm not sure how colonisation would necessarily affect teaching on homelessness.
Perhaps if we rephrase it to be thinking about making it more inclusive rather than exclusive, thinking about how our learners should be aware of different population groups.
I wonder about decentralising as a term, but I think decolonising, for context, I grew up in a British colony. I think decolonise is extremely important, but I just wonder if there's also, if we're thinking about what can be done next, more than just that term.
And I think that's important because part of why I began where I began was to unpack what the word decolonising means, and it means far more than this geographic colonization or this notion of empire. I think it's more about structural inequalities in society. It's more about, and it includes racism, and it is primarily about racism, but there's so much intersectionality with all different groups and how that all plays a part. And you are right that it is a very expansive term, and I think I wanted to make that point early on. It's far more expansive than this notion of geographic colonization. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments just before we tie up? Please, could we have the microphone down here in the center? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. No pressure. Sophia just said you better make it a good one. My point is just purely as a suggestion to flatten the hierarchy, be that within an organization, within a structure, even amongst hearing the voices of our patients, because no one voice is more important than another voice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that includes, of course, our learners when we design medical curricula. It involves our patients in developing and designing patient care. Thank you. Thank you. Another comment at the back, please. And then after this one, I'll take one more comment before we wrap up. Thank you.
I was just thinking about how do we bring greater recognition to the patient groups or the demographics that have been included or used in our sort of curriculum formation, and how we sort of recognise that when we're developing our studies. But also beyond that, how do we start to get them more involved when we're forming the curriculum in the first place, so they're part of that sort of process and they're no longer being excluded or taken away? How do we give them more formal representation, kind of beyond volunteer roles? What we see a lot of is they come in but as a volunteer, not as almost like a recognised part of that team, but someone that comes in as almost like an extra.
And you mean with reference to the learner, don't you? Or that?
More in terms of like, so curriculum, when we're thinking about, you know, redesigning a curriculum or putting this in, how do we have sort of patient representation from those demographics?
It's so important, and I think payment and recognition of people's time is important in this. In a similar way, in some UK medical schools, they actually do pay or compensate students for this through, for example, credits to a kind of a selective component, or some kind of academic currency for that too. Can we have the last question here before we tie up? Thank you.
It's not a question, more of a bit of a comment.
Please.
So I manage the curricula for the RC Psych.
Wonderful.
So I'm kind of come in to see what you guys have been doing in terms of decolonisation. So we launched our latest curricula in 2022, and I feel your pain. We went through all of that as well. But one of the things, although we do these things, we didn't reflect it as much about decolonisation and all of that. We didn't really reflect it as much in the curricula as I guess you guys have been encouraged to when you did yours. So firstly, I would really love to link up with the RCGP to see what you've done and maybe share some good practice, because obviously, you know, you've been doing the work, and I'd be really, you know, pleased to support and work with you on that. And also just to talk about the how to involve patients more. At the RC site, we have the patient carer model where we have them paid. And so we employ them to come in and sit on whether it's curricular development or whether it's other aspects of what we do within psychiatry. And we find that that model works really well. I know money, and it's really tight in any sort of Royal College situation, but certainly if it's not something you do, it's definitely worth, because we get that retention, we get that quality of personnel through, and we've used it in all aspects, and it works really well. But anyway, it was just a comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So valuable, and let's please exchange contacts. And we can collaborate. That sounds wonderful. Mitch, would you mind flicking back to the browser just to show one of the initial results of the word cloud? And this is the question that we asked earlier as to what would you like to cover? And I hope to be able to tie up together, and I hope we've been able to address many of the things you'd have liked to have done. Is that possible, Mitch? Just to show that the browser screen again. But if not, I recall things from there to be, well, what does it mean? How did you implement it? Can we have some specific suggestions? What were the main changes? And give us a summary as to what you did and what the impact was, who the stakeholders were, and transfer some tips and some next steps. So I hope through that we've been able to cover a lot of what was on that word cloud initially. Anil.
Just to say, it's not just the RCGP that's been doing this work. All colleges are doing decolonisation work. Personally, I don't like the term decolonisation because I think it's limiting, it can be polarising, it can be triggering, and I'm much keener on inclusivity, or increasing inclusivity and reducing exclusivity. So it's a broader term than colonialism, because I've certainly had some challenging conversations when I've tried to bring it up that way. I just don't like the term. I think it's about trying to make it representative of the populations that we serve, the educators that we have, the learners that we have. And I think a couple of comments about who's involved in all of this. We have a lay representative that's involved with the curriculum, and they help guide us. Also, the curriculum editors are brilliant at what they do. They're actually too good at what they do. There's 13 of them, and they've, to a certain extent, become a little bit too specialised in terms of their knowledge of particular areas. So what we encourage people to do is to actually mix up the topics that they're covering, so they're not too detailed in their knowledge and application of it, so it's making it broad and applicable to everyone rather than specialists. And the other thing that we've done is bring in external experts on various topics to help us, and the curriculum editors are then working on the information that they provide and editing that material. So basically they're doing what their job title says, editing the material that's come from experts, making it applicable to primary care. And I'm more than happy to make contact with other colleges. So if you My details are on the slides anyway, but if you want to just on the app, I think my details are on there as well. We promised we'd finish early, so that's 7 seconds. Okay.
Thank you.
That's good. So thank you very much for your time
so
and
much.
your contributions.